Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Breaking news, we're learning former senior advisor to Secretary of State Pompeo, named Michael McKinley, who has resigned last week, will join the ranks of something we've been covering all hour, the people testifying this week in the impeachment probe, and it is coming fast. He will face the House on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the Trump White House has been trying to keep the whole lid from blowing off, the Ukraine scandal unraveling before our eyes, more and more aides coming forward. The strategy is Stonewall. In fact, in a letter to Congress, the White House says the entire probe is basically, quote, baseless, unconstitutional, and thus they see no legal or governmental obligation to participate in it. Trump's own administration, though, is divided. Look at these different responses from the budget chief and, as we were mentioning, the defense secretary.
The OMB has been subpoenaed. Have you responded yet?
No, yesterday's letter speaks for itself. We will continue to not participate in this process.
We will do everything we can to cooperate with the Congress. Just in the last week or two, my general counsel sent out a note, as we typically do in these situations, to ensure documents are retained.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
You will comply with the subpoena?
We will do everything we can to comply.
I'm joined by former Acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal, who's faced the Supreme Court dozens of times and is back for opening arguments. Nice to see you. What do you think about what we're learning here, and topped by this breaking news that people really are coming forward despite everything I just outlined that the White House is up to?
Yeah, I mean, the White House is up to, you called it a stone wall. It's more than that. I mean, it's like an avalanche wall. It's just like the complete, utter resistance to getting the truth out. And it started with trying to suppress the whistleblower report back, months ago, and has continued so that they have said, for example, Ambassador Sondland can't testify, Fiona Hill can't testify, former Ambassador Yovanovitch can't testify, all these people, and now they are defying those refusals to testify, and they're going in and following the subpoenas. And, Mr. McKinley is just the latest in that list of people, and these are public servants, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is give the truth to the American people and our elected representatives in Congress.
Yeah, I also want to get your views on the really huge development of Rudy Giuliani being under federal investigation. You obviously worked at Maine Justice. You know how sensitive it is when they deal with certain high-profile individuals, certainly with the former prosecutor. Not that they're immune, but it's not something I think they take up lightly. So I'm curious of your views, given we've been covering that tonight, and also something that just crossed the wire. So it's not confirmed by NBC News, but it's credible reporting from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm going to read it to you, Neil, since I know you haven't had a chance to prep with it. But it says, headline, federal prosecutors scrutinize Giuliani's Ukraine business dealings finances, and says that this is a probe of his dealings with Ukraine, that they're reviewing, quote, Mr. Giuliani's finances, meetings, and work for a city mayor there, which gets into this whole government question of was there illegal foreign representation. And it says, quote, investigators have examined Giuliani's bank records. Again, I'm going to repeat our coverage. Giuliani has said he's not aware of the probe and denies any wrongdoing. Your thoughts on all of the above?
Well, Ari, I guess my real profound reaction here is just one of sadness. I'm not one of these partisan blood sport people who's happy when the other team's guy goes down or gal goes down. Rudy Giuliani was a legendary figure at the Justice Department and did so much good for the country in all sorts of ways. And to see this is, I don't know the word for it, but sad, really just tragic. I think the investigation will unfold. It's obviously tougher to investigate in many ways an attorney than others. Here, he might not have been only acting as an attorney. He might have been acting in other ways. So I suspect this investigation is going to take some time. But I don't think it should distract from the main question facing the American people right now, which is, did Donald Trump go and seek help from a foreign power to benefit his own campaign? Giuliani is still only a sideshow in that. And what the president is doing is he's trying...
Let me press you on that, Neil, for us to understand. Is he a sideshow, or is he, according to the White House call notes, the person outside of government who was being invoked by the president as the agent of this plot?
Right. I should have said Giuliani's criminal liability is a sideshow.
Whether or not he's
Giuliani
charged.
is a conduit, to be sure, and part of the story. Though, if I were in the House and impeaching and looking at impeachment, I wouldn't need Giuliani. I've got the president's own words in the July 25th phone call and so many other things, including the whistleblower report. So I don't think you need Giuliani. But I think what the president is banking on through his Stonewall strategy is to try and run out the clock and hope that he can tie this up and say, I'm not going to follow the subpoenas. I'm not going to turn over evidence. I'm not going to turn over witnesses. They wrote his White House counsel wrote a ridiculous 8-page memo last week, which I call the crayon memo, because I think that's the depth of the legal arguments there, saying they don't have to turn anything over. And there was one president who tried that before. His name was Richard Nixon, and he went down in flames. And I suspect the same thing will happen here if this president does that.
It is Tuesday, the 15th of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a little scant dash, a mere pinch of smoked hot Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Try it. You'll like it. So subtle, just a pinch now. Well, speaking of just a pinch, it looks like Rudy's in a pinch. But he's the least of the characters in this scandal. Wow. It's almost like a movie. Except a movie that's totally disjointed, has no linear quality to it. You jump around here, you jump around there, you change time, tense. Oh my God. But pretty soon, it all starts to make sense. And we're talking a little bit more than just campaign finance violations here with Russian money in some fashion. And what the hell is John Bolton being the guy with... He's the paragon of integrity in this show. John Bolton. I don't know. I had a bit of a debate with a couple of the other managing partners here at Netroots Radio about whether that proves that we're living in hell, or are we just merely in purgatory? So we had a bit of a debate, and nothing was really decided about where we are. We just know it's not a good place when John Bolton is the paragon of integrity in this, shit show. It's a little early in the morning, but maybe if you're listening on podcast, it doesn't matter. So I made a joke before about John Bolton being the whistleblower. And now I've noticed a few people putting out memes that are touching upon the idea that John Bolton could be the whistleblower. I made that sort of offhanded joke when we first started hearing about the first whistleblower. So we have that, but okay, so John Bolton, if he is the whistleblower, is quite afraid to make his countenance known, and I know why. Because he still wants to deconstruct the administrative state, and Trump is like Hitler. He just doesn't know how to be a good general. That's why... Let's remind ourselves, those generals who wanted to kill Hitler weren't doing it because they thought he was a madman. Well, yeah, they thought he was a madman. But they didn't think it was because he was doing bad things to get rid of the Jews and take over the world. They just thought he was incompetent. Had to get him out of the way. They were all Nazis to the core. They just thought that the guy who was running the show just couldn't run it, and they're going to lose their chance at being able to have world dominance and get rid of all the Jews. So, in this situation, John Bolton is no paragon of integrity. He just can't stand that the guy sitting in the Oval Office is incompetent and they can't deconstruct the administrative state before he gets impeached. That's all. So we have John Bolton on one hand here. People are now beginning to tout as the paragon of integrity. A hero. And then you have 3 women who I read testified on average of 10 hours. And one of those women was Hillary Clinton, and she did 11. So I guess the average, whatever that means. But we had Fiona Hill and Marie Yovanovitch, former Ukrainian ambassador, and then Fiona Hill was Trump's, I think her title was senior advisor on Russian affairs. Is that what her title was? But regardless, I would probably put them in the pantheon of heroes as true civil servants. John Bolton is no civil servant. John Bolton is out for, creating the means to get an ends. Or an end. I think there's a few ends there. That's why I say ends. Whereas Fiona Hill and Marie Yovanovitch are truly loyal to the Constitution of the United States of America. And we know what's going to happen to them now. They will go the way of most of the others who have stood up and tried to protect America, and that's pretty much being ultimately and utterly destroyed. Those who love America the most, apparently, are the enemy of the state when you're in cahoots with not just one hostile foreign power, but a few. I wonder, has Trump put America out for bid, and he's just seeing who's going to come in with the better deal, and then he'll, have a handshake and get the money, and I don't know. I don't think he's going to be living in exile in Paris. Nope, I don't think it's going to be there. Or does he think that he's going to be, I don't know, regional governor of the United States of America? Because he's not going to be president anymore. Not when we get partitioned. Just like in Man in the High Castle. I wonder if that's how it's going to be. Well, he is not going to be leading free America in the middle there. In the great middle of America. Where the Rockies are. Wolverines! So, all kidding aside now. I mean, this cinematic construct is a little bit too. Let's get down to reality now. Kurds are being killed in mass numbers, along with journalists, etc. Kurdish-speaking reporters who are giving granular reportage are being blocked and suspended by Twitter because of a coordinated Turkish troll bot campaign. Oh, as an aside, it seems I've been blocked on a closed group here in Southern Oregon that is called Uncensored. It purports to be uncensored. And it is, and I've mentioned this before in social media and here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It seems to be inundated, not with just the usual Trump bros, the right-wing wackos and stuff, and folks like that. I mean, we have them here in Southern Oregon, even in a so-called liberal enclave like Ashland. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, I guess. But we also have, and then, I'll just jump ahead real quick. It seems I've been blocked by a vast majority, or enough, on this closed group that I'm unable to follow comments. I mean, there'll be 100 comments and I can read maybe 3 or 4. And it turns out those people haven't blocked me, so I can read their comments. And apparently, because of that, it puts a wider ban on my postings and my countering troll bots and right-wing crazy lunacies. That is now no longer seen by the majority of the group because I've been effectively blocked. And I'm not the only one. We're all liberals. The administrator, unfortunately, she's like a 19-year-old, 20-year-old college kid there at Ashland. She has no idea what's going on. She can't figure out why I've been blocked. And we have machine bots. I've mentioned this. There's a new one taking over now, who purports to be working at San Onofre as one of the workers there generating electrical power. And San Onofre has been closed and not generating any power since 2013. I exposed that, and some people go, "Oh, no way!" And then people were starting to open up their eyes. But I will tell you what got me effectively blocked was when I exposed the LaRouche cultists. It took me a while. I just figured they were the regular, I don't know, weird. See, we have some weird neo-Nazi pot growers here. So it was some weird amalgam of like navel-gazing, kind of, racist, homophobic weirdness from supposed hippies, navel-gazing hippies. So I call them, neo-Nazi pot growers. I only figured this out about the LaRouches when some Ron Paul newsletter stuff from back in the day was cited or used as a posting, and then riff off of that. And I got to tell you, as soon as I said, "You're a LaRouche," the lockdown started happening. So I just mention this because it seems like liberal voices are effectively being blocked on many platforms. Zuckerberg, we're going to be speaking about him in a bit here, has pretty much locked down Facebook again, just like in 2016. And Twitter blocking Kurdish reportage, or Kurdish-speaking reportage, because of Turkish trolls. A campaign in which to say, "Oh, this guy's violating terms of use because look at these violent images, this violent reportage." They don't call it reportage. I don't know what has to be done. Do we break up these platforms? Will that make it better? You know what? We could just give Zuckerberg MySpace and keep him there and let him say, "Hey, it's MySpace, like my pillow." Which, by the way, is the most returned pillow, and actually the most returned item in all of Bed Bath & Beyond. As an aside. Yikes. It's only Tuesday, and we're all over the place. Well, we better get back to the structure and the curated part of the show, because at the top, that was Neil Catal once again mentioning that if Trump continues to run out the clock on the impeachment probe, he will go down in flames, just like Nixon. But he won't resign. We already know that. I don't think so. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Mark Zuckerberg has been hosting secret confabs with right-wing journos, commentators, and politicos for strategy on stopping a Democratic 2020 slam dunk. They've got to stop it. He's really afraid of Elizabeth Warren. Well, it doesn't matter whether she's president or not. I think she's going to be as part of someone's government and administration. I really do. McConnell vowed to block a House prescription drug plan that would save $345 billion by negotiating for lower insulin prices. Well, he wants to he can't have that. The Democrats want it, so to the graveyard it goes. But all week they're going to have to jam through some more Federalist Society judges. They're going to ram them through. That's the only thing that works in the Senate. Nothing from the Democrats, because that way they can say how the Democrats are do nothing. And a classified document written in the 1970s by Henry Kissinger explains Trump's abandonment of the Kurds today. It all goes back to Kissinger and Nixon. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where racist neo-Nazi white nationalists disrupted the Euro 2020 qualifier between England and Bulgaria in Sofia yesterday. and the jailed Catalan separatist, hit recently with the heaviest sentence by Spain's Supreme Court, says a new referendum is unavoidable. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Link, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our Patreon link. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. A recurring donation of, how about a cost of an espresso-type coffee drink goes a long way. Helping us pay our bills and get that newish machinery that we need to purchase pretty soon. Been accumulating funds, and I've been out there looking and conferring with Tom about it. And we're going to figure it out. And, of course, the attendant software. How much can I transfer from my MacBook now? We shall find out. Anyway, I'm saving the data that I have on there in hopes that I can transfer as much as possible. But we would be unable to do any of this resistance endeavor without your generosity, and we thank you very, very much for doing so. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever podcasts can be found. Well, since we burned up so much time with my morning rant, we're going to have to dive into these offerings here because we don't want it to be fast food, but let's get it on out on the table for you and let's dive in. This first offering here is by Natasha Bertrand and Daniel Lippman out of Politico. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has been hosting informal talks and small off-the-record dinners with conservative journalists, commentators, and at least one Republican lawmaker in recent months to talk about issues like free speech and discuss partnerships. Partnerships? You mean like the kind of partnership that you had with Trump in that San Antonio office where you sat side by side with Cambridge Analytica and gained the 2016 election? You mean that kind of partnership, Mark? Because that way you won't be broken up into some little tribe.com. No one knows what tribe is anymore. You got to be pretty damn old in internet age to be able to remember tribe. Everybody remembers MySpace, though. Mark has complained that we liberals just don't want to go outside our wheelhouse. We don't want to talk with people who disagree with us. Well, excuse me, Mark. By you having a partnership with the Republican Party and the right wing once again shows exactly where your wheelhouse is now, isn't it? Isn't it? I shall also remind folks that Mark Zuckerberg is an example of what happens when you drop out of Harvard without taking one humanities class to make more money than God. Josh Israel of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell promised last month that he would block a drug pricing plan introduced in the House, calling it a socialist program that would do damage to the healthcare system. Now, new analyses by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, known as the CBO, has found that drug plan put forward by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi would in fact save Medicare $345 billion over a decade, but it also means that a lot of that money wouldn't be going into Mitch McConnell's coffers. And what is this socialist program that would do damage to the healthcare system? The bulk of the savings would come from allowing a program to negotiate lower prices with pharmaceutical companies, something that is currently banned by law because of the Republicans and Moscow Mitch. That would save money on the insulin and other expensive medications. Pelosi unveiled the House Democratic plan called the Lower Drug Costs Now Act last month. She said the bill would be transformative in lowering the costs of prescription drugs. McConnell, the self-described Grim Reaper who blocks all progress in the Senate, quickly vowed to block the legislation. Socialist price controls will do a lot of left-wing damage to the healthcare system. And of course, we're not going to be calling up a bill like that. And so, insulin is so expensive that diabetics are dying in droves because of the Grim Reaper who blocks all progress in the Senate and stops the lives of real human beings. Brian R. Gibson of Foreign Policy Magazine brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, the secret origins of the U.S. and the Kurdish relationship can be traced back to a classified document written in the 1970s by Henry Kissinger. On June 30th of 72, two Kurdish men, Idris Barzani and Mohammed Othman, arrived nondescriptly at a CIA sprawling headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and were led into the office of the agency's legendary director, Richard Helms. They discussed a stunning shift in U.S. policy. Henry Kissinger, Nixon's national security advisor, had personally authorized Helms to express American sympathy for the Kurds' plight and assure them of his readiness to consider their request for assistance. For more than a decade, the Kurds have been fighting against the Iraqi government and had made countless pleas for American assistance to no avail. Helms was now declaring that the United States had changed its mind. He failed to mention it would soon change again. The long history of the U.S. abandonment of the Kurds is well understood by most observers. What has mostly gone forgotten is that such eventual betrayals were entirely predictable, given the way the two sides came together in the first place. Indeed, it's impossible to understand Trump's decision to support Turkey in waging war in Syria against U.S. allied Kurds without understanding the largely untold origins of the U.S.-Kurdish relationship. The history extends back to the 1920s when the Kurds, the largest ethnic group in the world not to have a state of its own, were promised autonomy by the Treaty of Sèvres. But the two great powers of the day, Britain and France, reneged in 1923 and carved up the Kurdish territories into modern-day Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Wow. Like Lawrence of Arabia, where are you? Oh, you died in a motorcycle accident, darn. The Kurds rebelled against this betrayal and were crushed by their new British, French, Iranian, and Turkish colonizers. After decades of relative quiet, the Kurds tried again to achieve autonomy in the aftermath of Iraq's 1958 revolution, which saw the overthrow of the Hashemite monarchy. After the break of war in Iraqi Kurdistan in September of 1961, the U.S. government adopted a policy of non-interference. The primary objective of U.S. policy at the time was to maintain good relations with Baghdad, and there was always the nagging suspicion that the Kurdish rebel leader, Mustafa Barzani, was a communist agent, given his 11-year exile in the Soviet Union from 1947 to 1958. However, two close allies in the region, Israel and Iran, those were allies to America, by the way, quickly concluded that the Iraqi Kurds were ideological and strategic allies that could be exploited to keep the radical Arab nationalist regime in Baghdad and its large military tied down. Starting in mid-1962, the Shah of Iran ordered his intelligence agency, Savak, which I got to tell you was a fairly brutal intelligence agency, to help finance Kurdish insurgency in northern Iraq to undermine the stability of the regime in Baghdad. The Israelis joined the Iranian-led intervention in 1964 after Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion recognized the Kurds as a strategic ally against the radical Arab regime in Baghdad. For the next decade, the Iranian and Israeli strategy was simple. As long as the Kurds presented a clear and present danger to Baghdad, the Iraqi military could not be deployed. Well, it took the United States a little while to warm to the Kurds again, but that changed in 1968 when the Ba'ath Party, whose leadership included a young Saddam Hussein, seized power and firmly established itself as the dominant political force inside Iraq for the next 35 years. In March of 1970, Saddam concluded that the war against his country's Kurds was a wasted effort and personally traveled north and met with Barzani. Saddam agreed to every demand, which centered on Kurdish autonomy within a unified Iraq, but indicated that the program would not be implemented until 1974. Essentially, the March Accord bought time for both sides. Saddam was able to consolidate power, and Barzani was able to secure a powerful new ally, the United States. Well, then the article goes into a little bit of inside baseball. CIA Director Colby and Henry Kissinger were at loggerheads on whether to pick up the Kurds and back them consistently and over time. And Kissinger was a bit dubious. He wanted a little bit more options because betraying an ally is a Kissinger foreign policy maxim. All right, we better get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
This year's Nobel laureates in physics have painted a picture of a universe far stranger and more wonderful than we ever could have imagined.
Theoretical physicist Ulf Danielsson from Uppsala University. Here's the announcement this morning from Göran Hansson of the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physics with one half to James Peebles for theoretical discoveries in physical cosmology, and the other half jointly to Michel Mayor and Didier Queloz for the discovery of an exoplanet orbiting a solar-type star. James Peebles was born in 1935 in Canada, in Manitoba, and he has had his career largely at Princeton University, where he is today the Albert Einstein Professor of Science. Michel Mayor was born in 1942 in Lausanne, in Switzerland. He is Emeritus Professor of Astronomy at the University of Geneva, Université de Genève in Switzerland. Didier Queloz, finally, was born in 1966 and is also from Switzerland. He's currently Professor of Astrophysics, both at the University of Geneva and at the Cavendish Laboratory of the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom.
Back to Ulf Danielsson.
At the time of its discovery, in the mid-1960s, James Peebles realized the importance of cosmic radiation. Through his work and new ways to observe and measure our universe, cosmology evolved into a science of precision based on the mathematical foundation. Michel Mayor and Didier Queloz, they are awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery of a planet in orbit around another sun. They couldn't see the planet directly, so they had to use other methods. When a planet is orbiting a star, the star wobbles back and forth. The effect is tiny, and you need care and ingenuity if you want to detect it. Through the study of these exoplanets, we will learn more about the physics of how planets form and evolve and get a new perspective on our planetary home.
For an in-depth listen about the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physics, look for the Scientific American Science Talk podcast later today. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
What does high crimes and misdemeanors mean? Here's a quick synopsis. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Article 2 of the Constitution, which sets forth the powers and limitations of the executive branch, the presidency, says, quote, "The president, the vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors." Treason is defined in the Constitution, and bribery is pretty well understood, but high crimes and misdemeanors, well, not so much. First of all, the word high refers to the office, not the crime. A high crime is committed by someone in a high office. And the word crime does not mean a criminal offense. And misdemeanors, as we understand the word today, has nothing to do with impeachment at all. Indeed, a high crime or misdemeanor need not be a violation of any criminal law, although it could be. That's because the phrase high crimes and misdemeanors, as understood at the time the Constitution was adopted, was a technical term, a term of art. It encompassed a range of behavior by high officials. an abuse of office, a violation of the oath of office, a violation of the public trust, an offense against society. At a time when impeachment is being considered, we thought that reviewing the applicable standard might be helpful. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1914. That was the day that President Woodrow Wilson signed the Clayton Antitrust Act. The act also became known as Labor's Magna Carta. Prior to the passage of the law, it was common for business owners to describe labor unions as unlawful conspiracies. In 1890, Congress had passed the Sherman Antitrust Act. The original intent of this act was aimed at disrupting the powerful business monopolies of the day. Not surprisingly, instead of going after the enormously powerful corporate monopolies, industrialists used the Sherman Antitrust Act to go after union organizing. The Clayton Antitrust Act challenged that anti-labor practice. It stated that the labor of human being is not a commodity. It went on to say, quote, "Nothing contained in the antitrust laws shall be construed to forbid the existence of labor, agriculture, or horticulture organizations." And it announced that labor organizations were not illegal combinations or conspiracies. Its message on the labor question could not be clearer. The law also strengthened the existing rules against business monopolies. It made it unlawful for one person to sit on the board of directors of two competing companies. It also set up rules against mergers and corporate acquisitions that would limit market competition. All of these steps were meant to better protect consumers and workers. The act was named after its author, Democratic Congressman Henry de Lamar Clayton from Alabama. Most importantly for labor, Clayton's act made it legal for workers to engage in boycotts, strikes, and pickets. It was a blow to the practice of owners filing injunctions to stop labor organizing. It was an important legal victory for the rights of working people. After all these years, the Clayton Antitrust Act still makes news headlines whenever large corporations discuss mergers.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
It's been exactly 3 weeks since House Democrats announced they were going to begin the process of impeaching the president. It's been 1 week since Donald Trump, on behalf of the United States, abandoned our allies, the Kurds, in Syria after giving Turkey's authoritarian leader Erdogan his blessing to invade. And Congress officially returns Tuesday after a 2-week recess, while 12 of the Democratic presidential hopefuls take the debate stage again Tuesday night. All this following one of the most consequential weeks of impeachment developments. This week promises to be a doozy. A number of high-profile witnesses are scheduled to give sworn depositions behind closed doors this week, starting with Trump's former top aide on Russia, Fiona Hill, who spent upwards of 10 hours testifying on Monday. Hill reportedly told Congress that Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, circumvented the administration to pursue a shadow foreign policy on Ukraine. Hill reportedly raised concerns about Giuliani's efforts in Ukraine and also spoke in support of ousted U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, who testified Friday. According to reports, Hill told lawmakers that after former National Security Advisor John Bolton learned about Giuliani's efforts to get Ukraine's government to investigate Trump's political opponents, that Bolton told Hill that he wanted no part of Giuliani's and acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney's, quote, drug deal. Yes, he called it a drug deal. Bolton told Hill to report the situation to the top lawyer at the National Security Council, that would be John Eisenberg. Bolton also referred to Giuliani as a, quote, hand grenade. Hill told lawmakers she considered what was happening to be a clear counterintelligence risk to the United States. And the depositions continue. On Tuesday, George Kent, a Ukraine expert at the State Department, is expected to testify. Tuesday is also the deadline for Giuliani, Defense Secretary Mark Esper, Acting OMB Director Vaught, and the Office of Vice President Mike Pence to all turn over documents that have been subpoenaed. On Wednesday, former Mike Pompeo advisor Michael McKinley, who just resigned from the State Department last week, is set to be in the hot seat. On Thursday, it's the long-awaited deposition of the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland. And on Friday, Laura Cooper, a defense official who works on Ukraine, is scheduled to be deposed. Friday's also the deadline for Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and Energy Secretary Rick Perry to turn over documents that have been subpoenaed. Stay tuned. Now, if you're like me, you're asking, why is all this testimony happening behind closed doors? Well, on Monday night, Chris Hayes asked the same of Congressman Denny Heck, who was in the room for Fiona Hill's deposition.
Why are these being done as closed-door depositions?
Because they're depositions, right? We're conducting this to the highest standards and the best practices of investigations. We're not in the public hearing portion of this yet. We'll get there. But what we don't want is for all of the witnesses, some of whom will be hostile, to coordinate with one another, because that will impede us in our effort to get to the complete truth. And I think that's what the American public wants. Obviously, they're going to want to know all this information at some point, but for the time being, what they want us to do is get to the truth.
Okay, but don't take too long. We need those hearings televised. Meanwhile, the situation for the Kurds we abandoned in northeast Syria last week is getting more dire by the minute. The New York Times reporting, quote, Syrian government forces streamed into the country's northeast on Monday, seizing towns where they had not set foot in years and filling a vacuum opened up by President Trump's decision to abandon the United States' Syrian Kurdish allies. Less than a week after Turkey launched that incursion into northern Syria with Trump's apparent approval, President Bashar al-Assad of Syria, considered a war criminal by the U.S., struck a deal with our former allies, the Kurds, putting them now in cooperation with not only the government of Syria, but the Russians too. In typical Trump fashion, he created a crisis, then tries swooping in to save the day with a fix to his manufactured catastrophe. On Monday night, in a letter to Congress, Trump issued an executive order declaring a national emergency due to the situation in and in relation to Syria, and in particular, the recent actions by the government of Turkey to conduct a military offensive into northeast Syria. The Washington Post reporting, quote, the Trump administration called on Turkish President Erdogan to implement an immediate ceasefire in northern Syria and impose sanctions against Turkey on Monday in response to its military aggression. Nancy Pelosi said of the president's plan to sanction Turkey, quote, President Trump has unleashed an escalation of chaos and insecurity in Syria. His announcement of a package of sanctions against Turkey falls very short of reversing that humanitarian disaster. The Washington Post reiterates, Donald Trump gave Turkey the green light to attack our Kurdish partners, betraying the thousands of fighters who gave their lives to keep the world safe from the barbarism of ISIS. His erratic decision-making is threatening lives, risking regional security, and undermining America's credibility in the world. Pelosi noted that the House will vote on a bipartisan package to disapprove of Trump's decision this week. The Senate is also expected to vote on the joint resolution. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener-supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit. We are going to have a high of about 74, overnight lows in the upper 40s, and looks like quite a bit of rain, about a quarter of an inch tomorrow, with more rain in the days that follow. And we're going to abbreviate the local weather and get right into weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 64 and partly cloudy. Paris is 62 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 69 and partly cloudy with a flood watch. Kiev is 74 and fair. Kabul is 70 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 78 and fair. Tokyo is 63 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Racist abuse cast a blight over a Euro 2020 qualifier between Bulgaria and England yesterday, Monday, with the match in Sofia twice halted by the referee after monkey noises and chants from the crowd were aimed at black players from the visiting team, England. English FA Chairman Greg Clark, present at the Levski Stadium, said it was probably one of the most appalling nights I've seen in football. British broadcaster ITV showed groups of men dressed in black clothes, cupping mouths and hurling abuse from the stands. England manager Gareth Southgate informed the UEFA delegate after the first incidents and public announcement was made with play stopped. The abuse continued, and the Group A match, which England went on to win 6-0, was again temporarily suspended by the referee under a 3-step UEFA protocol for tackling racist and neo-Nazi abuse.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
The Catalan separatist leader, hit by the heaviest jail sentence by Spain's Supreme Court for his role in the region's failed secession bid, said a new referendum on independence was unavoidable. Oriol Junqueras, the Catalan regional government's former deputy leader, said in emailed answers to questions that the prison sentence imposed on him and 8 others on charges of sedition only made them and their movement stronger and more determined. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coër. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.